Madam Toastmaster, you say tomato. Fellow Toastmasters, Honored Area Governor, I say tomato. As an Englishman who's lived in the United States for nearly 30 years, I'm very well aware of the nuances of pronunciation that are highlighted in that Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers song, Let's Call the Whole Thing Off, which goes, 1, 2. You say tomato, I say tomato. You say potato, I say potato. Tomato, tomato, potato, potato, let's call the whole thing off. You say either, I say either. You say neither, I say neither. Either, either, neither, neither. Well, you get the idea. England and America, despite sharing a common language, are, as Judge Shaw once remarked, two countries separated by that common language. Not just in terms of nuances of pronunciation, but actually also in terms of the different meanings of words. Now, many Toastmasters in Silicon Valley were born in countries other than the United States. You often go to meetings where there's people who had to learn another language before they came to America. I'm not in that situation. My native language was English. Other Toastmasters have to learn a language, and when they come here, people make allowances for their uniquely Asian way of pronouncing words. Or they might even be amused by their charming French accent. But in my case, I had to learn American. And I well remember my first summer in the United States. I was here as a graduate student, but I needed work in the summer, and I found work on a construction site. The first week I was there, the foreman, or the boss man, wanted me to dig out some very stubborn fence posts. He gave me a pickaxe and a shovel, and I said, you know, this whole job would be a lot easier if you could give me a lever. He said, lever, boy? That's what I do with my woman when I'm through with her. You need a lever. And that was my first example of differences in pronunciation, but also differences in meaning. To stay with that whole area, which does confuse, I think, immigrants from England like myself, of hardware and tools, and like Saturday morning, you know, if you go down to Home Depot or Home Depot, there'll be American guys with their tool belts walking up and down the aisles, having no trouble at all. For instance, if they want to find an implement to loosen or fasten a nut in a bolt, they know to go up and ask for a wrench. Whereas an Englishman, fresh off the plane, will be looking in vain for a spanner. If the American man wants to drill holes in the wall to fasten photographs or heavy objects, he knows he gets his drill, he drills the hole in the wall, and he gets an anchor before he puts the screw in. An Englishman will walk around the store asking where they keep the roll plugs, which is what they call anchors in England. If the hole was drilled in the wrong place, American handyman would get out a tub of spackle and fill it in. In England, you ask for polyfiller. So the differences in meaning can also confuse people. But it's not just between England and America that we find differences in pronunciation and meaning. Within England itself, which is a little tiny island, I think it's the same square miles in diameter as Oregon, the same area as Oregon, there are vast differences in pronunciation that can be detectable within the space of as little as 30 miles. For instance, we don't all in England say tomato. That's what would be known as a BBC accent, or was known as a BBC accent, because it's the way they trained the presenters on the BBC radio back in the 1930s to speak. You can't imagine, for instance, in the Beatles era, John Lennon asking Ringo Starr to please pass the potatoes. He would say, hey Ringo, you got any of those potatoes? It's a totally different way of speaking. And this was highlighted for me by my parents, who came over one summer to visit me, the first trip they ever made to the US. They were mid-Atlantic. My father had been talking to my mother. They were very excited, their first time on a transatlantic flight. About halfway through the flight, the gentleman in the row behind, who'd been eavesdropping, tapped my father on the shoulder and asked him which part of Staffordshire he was from, because he'd been able to hear his accent. Now, Staffordshire is an area 30 miles by 50 miles. So it would be rather similar to a flight from the US to the UK, somebody from the Bay Area being asked, based on their accent alone, which part of Marin County they were from.
Wow.
There are, of course, regional differences within the US. Accents tend to vary here as well, but in the differences of hundreds or even thousands of miles. So there's a very easy to imitate for Englishmen like myself, deep South accent, where people go fishing with their catfish and get their chickens. There's also more subtle accents, such as the Minnesota accent, where people have lutefisk on Sunday. And then I can't even begin to imitate the accents that JFK and his brothers had, which was the New England or Boston regional accent. But I would say, as Toastmasters, the regional differences that we have due to our heritage in both pronunciation and meaning is something that should be encouraged. I know that in the room today we have an R counter trying to catch filler words and pauses. I'd hate to see the day when Toastmasters appoint pronunciation police to try and keep everybody pronouncing in a bland, monotone way. Just like Toastmasters encourage the use of volume and pitch for vocal variety, I would say accents, regional differences also add to vocal variety. So in the rich salad of human communication, I think there's room for both tomatoes and tomatoes.